Hello, everyone. We're continuing with our study of medication on Shabbat, and we mentioned yesterday that there are other leniencies, so we're going into one more, and this is about continuing medication that was already prescribed, and even vitamins, which is even more surprising for me. So, if one began taking a medication during the week, and it must be taken for several days consecutively, so that skipping the Shabbat dose will harm its effectiveness, they may continue taking the medicine on Shabbat. This is because some maintain that the rabbinic enactment does not apply to dosing that began before Shabbat. If you remember, we talked about traveling before Shabbat, and we'll also try that to the Parsha. We said that the rule of the rabbis was that you're not allowed to go on a boat on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday because you might be seasick on Shabbos. So you should board the ship before Wednesday, and also about flying and also traveling otherwise. So once something started before Shabbat, then we don't have the prohibition, especially since the dosages were already given the way that they are, and not you don't have to make anything new because if you're taking a pill for 7 days or 10 days for antibiotics kind of thing, so it's already there. You're not going to we don't have the gzera, the fear that you have to worry about starting to make something up because we already have these dosages. So when dealing with mass-produced medicine, one may rely on this opinion, even the chatchila, which means even without any question, and one may take such medicine even when they are not in pain. And if you remember, we also said that on Yom Kippur, it's the same rule. Similarly, a woman who is taking birth control pills or medication to help her maintain a pregnancy or a cycle or whatever it is may continue taking this medication on Shabbat as well. Again, the pills are already dosed out the way that there should be, and if I remember correctly, somebody told me that the obstetrician says 3 hours late, 3 days wait, so it's even more serious than regular medication. And if one takes daily vitamin supplements or weight loss pills to improve their health, they may continue on Shabbat as well. And so for me, that's more interesting and maybe even exciting because vitamin supplements are very close to what we talked about, different remedies and teas that people make at home. And so if this is something that comes in a bottle, then that's, I guess, the reason for the leniency to allow it to continue on Shabbat and not to have to worry about stopping and losing the opportunity for 24 hours plus of changing it, especially if something is taken at a certain time of the day. I know that for my high blood pressure, which I think is job related, not not physiology. It's I take it every morning at 9 a.m. and so that's what we keep. And I actually have to figure out what we do when we change the clock, and probably just take it at 9 and continue on like that. So let's just go into the idea of injections and intravenous because there's another fear that is called chovel, of drawing blood. It's a toada of shochet, of slaughtering. And so this is going out of the realm where we were with remedies and making them and grinding spices or herbs. This is going into the question of drawing blood. Sometimes a regular sick person needs an injection or intravenous infusion on Shabbat, since a subcutaneous injection does not necessarily cause bleeding. Halacha views it no differently from other types of medicine. It is permitted for a sick person. If one is not sick but is in pain, they may ask a non-Jew to administer the injection. So that will make it the shvut, because the whole gezerah was, if it's not necessarily going to draw blood, is back to the idea of grinding. However, a Jew may not administer an intravenous injection or infusion on Shabbat because doing so causes bleeding, which some maintain is prohibited by Torah law. Thus, as long as the person is not dangerously ill, one should defer to this stringent opinion. If a port was installed beneath the skin with a catheter surgically inserted into the vein before Shabbat, one may attach an IV bag to it on Shabbat, even when there is no danger to life. sometimes they just give it to a person to be able to be hydrated because they don't necessarily want to drink just clear water, and so saline adds more stuff into it. A non-Jew may administer an intravenous injection or infusion to a regular sick person. So if you remember, there's three categories of sick people. People who are dangerously ill, we break everything for them by an Orthodox adult Jew. But we are talking now the difference between a regular sick person or somebody who is just suffering of pain. So if a wound or a needle needs to be disinfected with iodine or peroxide, one may not apply the disinfectant using cotton wool or a bandage because squeezing liquid out of them is prohibited on account of schita. I'm not sure why Rabbi Melamed is more stringent with this because we don't need the liquid that is coming out of it. Rather, one should pour the iodine or peroxide directly onto the surface that needs to be disinfected. Alternatively, one may apply it with a tongue depressor or synthetic non-absorbent material. If one knows, most of the gauze pads today, I think, are synthetic, not cotton or wool. And if you remember, those are the materials that are mentioned in the Torah. If one knows before Shabbat that he will have to administer an injection on Shabbat, it is preferable that he prepare and disinfect the syringe and needle before Shabbat. If he forgot to prepare in advance, or if it was medically advisable to do so, they may still prepare the shot on Shabbat, as this does not involve a Torah prohibition. And a nursing woman whose breasts are engorged may express or pump her excess milk on Shabbat on condition that she pump it in such a way that the milk goes to waste, such as into the sink or into a container with soap in it, so that the milk is immediately ruined. It is true that expressing milk on Shabbat in order to feed a baby is prohibited by Torah law as a Todah of Dash, but however, when the milk goes to waste, the prohibition is only rabbinic, and to relieve the pain, sages permitted it. So we won't continue with this halacha because I want to talk about traveling on Shabbat. So, in ancient times, before there was vehicles, people used to travel by foot or a camel or donkey, and so camels aren't mentioned in this week's parsha; they're mentioned in next week's. But when Abraham and Sarah and everybody else came to Canaan, they were either walking or riding on these animals, and so we know that this was before Torah was given, and so they were allowed to travel on Shabbat. But the rabbis tell us that the avot kimuko Torah kula. It's a Gemara in Eruvin where the idea is that our forefathers kept all the Torah that they could. Whenever there was a question, the rabbis actually argued, are they in the status of Ben Noach or of a Jew? And there's differing opinions. The small book called Parashat Drachim actually concludes that they were Bnei Noach, and it's only for this question about whether or not Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and the Shvatim were considered Jewish or not. But just to think about, in those days, traveling from Mesopotamia, where they originally lived, would have taken 3 to 4 weeks. That's why in Israel we started saying B'ten Talmud Livracha this week in Israel, because the rabbis enacted that you start praying only after the last Jew who made the pilgrimage to Jerusalem reaches their destination. And so in those times, it took 2 weeks with an animal. By foot, I'm guessing more than that. So we don't really know. But bottom line is, I think that's a interesting connection to Shabbat and the Parsha and the starting of saying the prayer for the rain that we think about those times. And so from Mesopotamia, which is between the Euphrates and the Tigris, it would have taken about 3 weeks. And Haran, which is in northeastern Syria today, they actually still speak Aramaic there. It's one of the only places in the world that they do, maybe a different dialect, but that was closer and it would have taken about a week and a half to come to Canaan. But of course, Avram didn't know where he's going, so there was some kind of prophecy that directed him in the right direction because he could have ended up somewhere else. So let's wish you a good Shabbos and open up for questions.